Good afternoon and welcome to the April 30th, 2025 edition of Office Hours presented by the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. My name is Dr. Tisa Kennedy. I'm the founder and executive director of the center. And before we get into the questions that have come in from our community, and there have been many, I just want to give you a quick overview of the center, issue a very quick disclaimer about office hours, and then we'll get into the updates. About the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. We were founded in 2021 with an ambitious vision for all college and career school students in the state of Maryland. And that's that they would be able to achieve these 6 pillars of collegiate financial wellness. And those are being creditworthy, ready, resilient, empowered, successful, and thriving. And if that is a vision that sounds like one you'd like to support, please do visit us online at mccfw.org. There's a contact form. There are also options to support. If you have used the information to your benefit, you can make a donation or just send us your experience, your feedback. We're at mccfw.org. Now, this particular program, Office Hours, is our semi-monthly free virtual student debt clinic where we take questions that have come in from the community and provide answers to the best of our abilities. But while giving those answers, I have to provide a disclaimer, and that is that the information presented during office hours is just that. It's information for informational purposes only. The information we present does not constitute personal, legal, or financial advice. I say this like every edition that there are, changes going on, but I mean it. There are a lot of changes going on, and sometimes those changes can be hard to keep up with. I was actually attending an event earlier in the week and didn't realize until I got there that some really important document had been published while I was en route to the event. And no significant changes there to report, but just a proposal of something like that. So we're just in an environment where things are fluid, happening quickly, and we do our best to give you the most up-to-date information possible, but the information should not be information that you act on by itself. You need to take a look at your household characteristics, your loan portfolio, your preferences, and combine it with information from reliable sources such as us, and then make a decision that's most feasible for you and your household. All right. Now that formality is out of the way, I just want to talk briefly about some updates. I'll start here in Maryland and, of course, everywhere. Today is the last day of Financial Literacy Month, or Financial Capability Month, as some people call it. And there have been a lot of activities. We have been working on a project with Towson University called the CREST Challenge. And that is part of a 2-campus pilot program that launched our first online financial education platform, which is called the CREST Academy. And the CREST, of course, stands for Creditworthy, Ready, Resilient, Empowered, Successful, and Thriving. So we're really excited about working with Towson University and Bowie State University coming up, but just increasing the financial literacy of college students in the state of Maryland, and just helping equip them to make more informed decisions and ultimately empower them to thrive, because that's a part of our mission. So shout out to Towson University and all the students, and we'll be sharing more information soon on that pilot program, the CREST Challenge, as well as our grand prize winner at Towson University. We've also been to events at Prince George's Community College. Over the weekend, they held Money Explosion, which is an annual financial fest that's held on the campus of Prince George's Community College in Largo, Maryland. And we were on hand to present on student loan basics. Also had the chance to attend another event sponsored by Trellis. Trellis puts out a national student financial wellness survey, and I was able to join them as they unveiled the results of the 2024 Student Financial Wellness Survey. Lots of insights there, and we'll share more about that later. But just wanted to give a recap of some of the events that have taken place this year's Financial Literacy Month. Moving on to student loans, I want to talk about default just a bit before we get into the questions, many of which do include student loan default. So there's been news recently. I think an announcement was issued on April the 21st from the Department of Education announcing that there would be, the Department of Education would start to collect or use collections tactics such as wage garnishments and seizure of federal benefits and tax refunds, basically resuming collections activity on loans that are in default. And a lot of people are afraid of this, and there is some confusion out there. So I just want to clear up that if you have loans that are in a forbearance right now, that's not default. If your loans are in deferment, that's not default. If you are in school and your loans are in an in-school deferment that does not require you to make payments, that is not the same thing as being in default. If you are a day late, you are delinquent, not in default. So the announcement that came out is specifically referring to student loans that are in default. Now, what does it mean to be in default? Student loan default, and I'm actually answering one of the questions that came in, but I just want to put this out here early so that people know the difference between delinquency and default. Delinquency happens a day after you miss a payment, so it doesn't take much to become delinquent. But being in default means that you haven't made payments for at least 270 days. So that means no payments for 9 months. You didn't contact the servicer to try to make any alternative arrangements. You just did not make payments for 9 months, and now the loans are in default. So the articles that you've been seeing are about collections activity for those types of loans, loans that have already entered default because payment has not been made for so long that the government decides to be more aggressive to pursue the repayment of that debt. So like I said, we have some questions coming up about it, but just want to make sure everyone knows that those activities only apply to student loans that are in default. And I actually have a podcast apart from the center on a Sirius XM podcast. And my most recent episode was The Truth About Student Loan Default. So if you want more details, I will drop that link in the comments of this video once it's up on YouTube to walk through the options for getting out of default. And again, just making sure everyone's clear about what this coming activity that will resume next week, what that means for people who are, again, living with loans that are in default. I think that's it. I'm checking my notes here. I think that's it for the update. So let's go ahead and get into the first question that has come in from our community. And that question is, voila, they said they are garnishing wages. What does that mean for me? Quite fitting to have that be the first question. So let's take a look at the answer. The first thing we want to do is find out what's your current repayment status, because if your loans are in repayment, in a deferment, in a forbearance, in anything other than default, then wage garnishment should not be on your radar. The announcement that came out on April the 21st from the Department of Education is about resuming collections activities, including wage garnishments. And again, that's specific to defaulted loans. Quick review again of what it means to be delinquent versus what it means to be in default. A loan becomes delinquent one day after missing a payment. A loan enters default after missing payments for at least 270 days. So it takes a long time to end up in default. If you're a delinquent, we recommend that you speak with your lender about some of your options for returning your loans to good standing. And if you're in default, you should definitely go to studentaid.gov, follow the instructions there to reach out to the default resolution group so that you can explore getting out of default. But you need to know if your loans are in default in the first place. And studentaid.gov would be the place to go and find that out. Once you log in, if you have any loans that are in default, as soon as you log in and get past all the two-step verification of your identity, when you get to your dashboard, if you have any loans that are in default, you'll see a gray bar at the top with a little red line next to it that will indicate you have at least one loan that's in default, and it will lead you to the options for getting on the path to get out of default. Back to delinquency. If you're late and your payment is not affordable, you could enroll in an income-driven repayment plan to see if that offers you a more affordable monthly payment. The place to begin, though, is studentaid.gov. All right, let's move on to our next question. All right, it says, I graduated in 2022, but I have not paid my student loans. A court case moved me into forbearance when I was about to begin making payments. Do I run the risk of being garnished? How do I avoid it? All right, those headlines around the resumption of collections activity on defaulted loans were very, they got a lot of attention. But the picture that was painted was that this is the start of some kind of new activity, and it's not. It's activity that's resuming after the pandemic era relaxation of some rules around loan forgiveness and around collections activity for loans that are in default. So let's take a look at the background to get a little more information about this particular question before we get to the answer. All right. So this student graduated, or borrower graduated in May of 2022. Then in January of 2023, they entered repayment. In January 2023, we were still in the COVID-19 slash national emergency payment pause. So no payments were required. No interest was accruing for people who had direct loans. The borrower applied for SAVE and the loans were put into forbearance. They applied for a new income-driven repayment plan, uploaded their proof of income, and they are now awaiting review. So it doesn't sound like this borrower's loans are in default. And if the loan is not in default, then wage garnishment is not something you need to be concerned with. Again, wage garnishment is a practice that's a part of collections activity that is reserved only for loans that are in default. So if you are late but not in default, then your wages will not be garnished. If you're in an in-school deferment, forbearance, any other official pause, you don't have to worry about wage garnishment. The only people who need to be concerned about penalties like wage garnishment, the seizure of your tax refund, or your Social Security benefits, the only people who need to be concerned about that are people who have federal student loans that are in default. If you're unsure about whether your loans are in default, you could check your servicer's online portal, or you can go to studentaid.gov, and that will tell you the status of every loan you have, regardless of the servicer that you're with. But to view the status for each of your loans, again, you can go to studentaid.gov. The information inside of your servicer's online portal is probably a bit more current. So you can see it in both spaces, but sometimes in studentaid.gov, the status may lag behind up to a month. But if you have loans with multiple servicers, then you'll want to go to studentaid.gov so that you can see all of your loans and identify any of them that are in default. All right, so let's move on to the next question. That is, what should I do? We get that a lot and definitely need details to be able to answer that question. So let's take a look at the background on this. I've been working on my credit score. It was at a high of 700 and decreased to 599. The only things I can think of are my student loans and the announcement of collections. I have not paid anything. What should I do? I also have a federal contract that ends June 30th, so I don't know if I can afford to pay any bills after that. All right, let's take a look at the answer. So before we get to the answer, we got a follow-up question, and that is, what is your loan repayment status? You can log into your servicer's online portal and look at the status of each loan, or you can go to studentaid.gov and take a look at the loan repayment statuses there. Again, the servicer might have information that's slightly more current, and what you're looking for is to see if any of the loans are delinquent, because if a loan is delinquent, that means that you are late with making payments. And if the loan is delinquent, you definitely want to get it back on track. So you should contact your servicer to inquire about your options for returning the loans to good standing. As far as the change in income is concerned, if you lose your income after June 30th, we're just recommending that you consider an income-driven repayment plan if you're not enrolled in one already, because with an income-driven repayment plan, if you experience a shock in income, and let's say you're unemployed, if your income is $0, you can let your servicer know that you no longer have income, and it's possible that your monthly payment required would be $0. Even with a $0 payment, your loan would remain in good standing. And that's what's important here, keeping that credit intact. If you are already enrolled in an income driven repayment plan, then you'd want to make sure to update your servicer if you end up losing your income so that they can revise what your required payment would be for the next 12 months. All right, let's move on to the next question. That is, what is happening? That's also a common question. So let's take a look at the background before we can answer that question specifically for this borrower. All right, so we've got a backstory here. February 21st, they applied to switch from the SAVE income driven repayment plan to IBR, which stands for income based repayment. March the 23rd, they received a letter saying, your payment plan request is approved, which showed their new payment amount under IBR. The same day, they received another letter stating your eligible loans have been placed on the income based repayment plan. Their account has been updated and the payment plan is listed as IBR for each loan. Then a month later, on April 23rd, they received a monthly billing statement saying your payment is due soon. It gives their total payment amount and says the payment is due May 20th, and great. Then 2 days later, April 25th, they received another letter that says your student loans have been placed into a forbearance, the SAVE forbearance, but they're not enrolled in SAVE anymore. Now the account says awaiting administrative forbearance. Ends, I was about to say September, ends July 31st, 2025. And then income-based repayment ends March 30th, 2026. And after all that, they're wondering, why am I back into forbearance if my account still says IBR? This is so draining. I wish I had a better answer for this borrower, but at this point, we're not sure why your account is still in forbearance, and we'd recommend contacting your servicer directly to find out what's going on with the application, or if you can get out of that administrative forbearance. The only thing that I can think of is just to keep in mind that we're in a time of several transitions as well as litigation. In terms of transitions, there's been, the overhaul of the loan servicing experience from the end user's perspective. There's also been, having the application for income-based repayment or income-driven repayment plans altogether being offline and coming back online. We have a new administration. We have a lot of changes happening at the same time. We also have that litigation related to the SAVE repayment plan. So with all of these things happening at the same time, and with a student loan servicing system that has to accommodate more than 40 million people, there are just some things that are not happening as smoothly as we would want them to. And I imagine that could be what's behind your experience. So as I said before, contact your servicer directly, ask why your account is still in forbearance. And if you want to re-enter repayment now, ask them if they can end the forbearance and put you back into repayment using the income-based repayment plan, IBR, for which your loans have been approved. All right, let's move on to the next question. That is, I owe a bill. The payments will likely pay off the loan total in 10 years. Should I pay extra? I just entered repayment in October of 2024. I work for an employer that allows me to be forgiven through PSLF. All right, let's take a look at the background. Okay, so here's the timeline. In October of 2024, the borrower applied for income-driven repayment. December of 2024, they applied for IDR again since they didn't receive a response. The IDR requests have not been processed. Each form was requesting SAVE as the repayment plan, but the repayment plan is the standard plan. And in February of 2025, they entered repayment. All right, so let's take a look at the answer. It's really helpful to have all that background. So got a quick question here. Did you consolidate your loans? And our advice will depend on your answer to that question. If you consolidated your loans, you must complete a new IDR request for another income-driven repayment plan. The IDR request has changed, and you'll have to select a different plan. The old loans, before they went into repayment, you needed to select a repayment plan. If you apply for an income-driven repayment plan, that request is attached to those older loans. If you consolidated, those older loans are paid off, a new loan is originated, and everything starts over. The repayment clock starts over. You may have a new servicer, but also the selection of a repayment plan starts over too. So you need a separate IDR request. And enrolling in an IDR plan will allow your payments to count toward PSLF. Now, if you did not consolidate your loans, payments that are made while you are enrolled in the 10-year standard plan can count toward public service loan forgiveness. However, PSLF requires a minimum of 120 months of payments on a qualifying repayment plan while you have that qualifying employment. So if you make it to the 10-year mark of payments, you should not have a balance left. So public service loan forgiveness would not be helpful in this situation. All right, let's move on to our next question. It says, I'm missing qualifying payments. How to rectify? All right, we've seen this a lot, but every case is different. So let's take a look at the background information so that we can give a custom solution. All right, it says the eligible payment counts on my FSA dashboard don't match up. For context, I was employed by a qualifying employer from July of 2021 to June of 2022. I took a break, went through 6-month onboarding for a government job. Yeah, we know, and have been employed there since December of 2022. All 5 of my loans say I have the correct amount of 32 payments so far. All but 5 of my loans say that I have 32 payments so far. The other 5 say that I have 29 payments. Strangely, they're all unsubsidized Stafford loans from graduate school. Looking at my qualifying payments for those 5, they only start at October of 2021 for some reason. July through September aren't there or say they're ineligible or eligible. They just don't exist. The other loans noting 32 payments date all the way back to July of 2021. What complicates the problem more is the text file that they downloaded says they only have 21 and 19, I guess that's eligible and qualifying payments, and not 32 and 29. They spoke with an agent at Federal Student Aid. The agent said they need to fill out a PSLF reconsideration form to ask to get it fixed. Has anyone else filled out the form? What's the process like? Or is there a better way that I should go about this? I'm trying to trust but verify what this agent is telling me. Wow, that's a lot. All right, let's take a look at the answer piece by piece. First, we have a question. Did all of your loans enter repayment at the same time? Now, if the loans all have the same repayment timeline, then they should have the same payment counts, both eligible and qualifying. So to review the loan status history, we're recommending that you go to studentaid.gov. Then once you get to the dashboard, go to view details and go down to view the loan breakdown. From there, you'll see a list of the loans. They're usually separated by servicer, and you want to make sure that you choose one of the 5 loans that has the incorrect payment count. And from there, click View Loan Details. Once you get to one of those individual loan records, you want to click View Loan Status History. And that should give you a timeline of the statuses of the loan. And what you want to look for in particular is July 2021 through September of the same year. And if you don't see that time frame listed there, that would be problematic. But I definitely want you to take a look at the status history, because within Federal Student Aid, you should be able to see everything going back to the grace period for that loan. So you should be able to see when it entered repayment. And if you don't see that it entered repayment at the same time as the other loans, even if it is supposed to have the same timeline as the other loans, and that means we have a problem with records. So let's take a look at the second part of the answer. We've seen missing records before, and eventually it's always worked out that the complete records become available. Now, the borrower also asked about the reconsideration request. That request is available through studentaid.gov, And I filled out a few. It does not take long at all. You need to identify the periods that you want reconsidered. So in this case, it would be July through September of 2021. And then you need to explain why. And there's a box on the application. You can type as much as you want to. In this case, though, if all of the loans have the same repayment timeline, then you shouldn't have much to say because it seems like it would be a case of missing records instead of that time actually not qualifying. But when you do fill out your reconsideration request, you'll have the opportunity to provide supporting documentation of your claim. According to FSA, that documentation should include or needs to include documents showing payment history or applicable letters you received either from us or a prior PSLF servicer. So before you submit the reconsideration request, go to studentaid.gov and see if you're able to find July through September of 2021 within the loan repayment status history of one of those 5 individual loans. And we wish you luck. All right, let's move on to question 7. That question is, I owe a bill, should I borrow? All right, so let's take a look. This one's coming from a current student. Let's take a look at the background. It says, I currently only owe $790 plus whatever books will cost. I can't afford that much money and my parents refuse to help pay. I need to pay off my debt for the summer classes I'm taking this year. I'll be transferring to a university after, and that will be in August. I've been looking at the loans I was offered, about $5,000 in unsubsidized loans for the 2024-2025 term, and I didn't need to use them, and $3,500 subsidized plus $2,000 unsubsidized loans for the 25-26 term. I was hoping to only take out a subsidized loan for the 25-26 term, but I've heard summer classes are the 24-25 term. I also don't want to accept only part of the subsidized loan and risk getting less financial aid for the university I'll be attending. How should I go about this? I want to be in as little debt as I can be. Well, we completely understand that desire to be in as little debt as possible. So let's take a look at the answer for this question. All right. So before you make a decision, we recommend that you reach out to your financial aid office to ask, is the summer term considered a header or a footer? And this will let you know if the aid is allocated to the current academic year, which is 24-25, or the next academic year, which would be 25-26. If you have $5,000 in loans being offered, you can accept enough to cover your current balance and the expense for the summer classes. Just a quick note here, make sure you account for the origination fees. Sometimes students are surprised when they borrow a $2,000 loan, but then let's say $1,900 is deposited into the account. And they're like, what happened? And it's usually not that much, but I just mean that whatever amount it was that you borrowed, a smaller amount ends up being posted to your student account. That difference is the origination fee that's charged on federal student loans. Now, going forward, each year you'll be offered your full eligibility for loans, and the schools must offer you full eligibility based on the information that's included in your completed FAFSA, as well as the cost of attendance for the university. And depending on your school's costs, your student aid index, and other aid, you should see your loans offered near the loan limits for students. All right, let's take a look at the next question. It says, I'm starting school in California in the summer. Can I still apply? All right, well, hello, California, all the way from Maryland. Let's take a look at the background here. It says, hi, I'll be starting a graduate program this upcoming summer. Would it be too late to apply for the FAFSA, or has the deadline passed? I've been out of school for 3 years, so I'm not sure what resources to consult. Let's take a look at the answer. The federal deadline to submit the FAFSA for the 24-25 school year is June 30th of 2025. The deadline to make corrections for that year is September 14th, 2025. Now, each college or career school may have its own FAFSA deadline, so it's important for you to check with the specific school that you're attending. Also, keep in mind that for the next academic year, that's 2025 to 26, the federal deadline to submit that form is June 30th of 2026. So either way, you've got time. All right, let's move on to the next question. That is, can I remove my parent or a parent from my FAFSA? All right, this is going to be a long one. So let's take a look at the background before we get to the answer. This student is under 24 years old, and for FAFSA purposes, this student would be considered a dependent at that age. They had a disagreement with their parents about school selection, and the parent refused to support if the student goes to their preferred school, meaning the student's preferred school. All right, let's start to get to the answer. A parent's information that's already included on the FAFSA can be updated if you first entered the incorrect parent's information on the FAFSA. But if you want your parent's income removed, that's something that you would have to contact the financial aid office at your institution to inquire about and potentially handle. The next part of this answer includes a lot more information. For future years, if your mother is still unwilling to provide support, here are the steps provided by federal student aid. For a parent who's unwilling to provide their information, unfortunately, you can't be considered independent of your parents just because they refuse to help you with completing the FAFSA. If they're not supporting you and refuse to provide their information or consent and approval to transfer their federal tax information on your FAFSA, here's the process for filling out the FAFSA form online. You're going to select yes to the question, are the student's parents refusing to provide their information on their FAFSA? And that way the FAFSA will be submitted without parent information. From there, you'll need to follow up with the financial aid administrator at the college or career or trade school you plan to attend to find out what you need to do next in order to receive a direct unsubsidized loan only. Keep in mind that the unsubsidized loans are the ones that accrue interest on day one of disbursement. All right, there's actually more to this answer. So let's get to the next part of the answer. Just a note of importance here. If you submit your FAFSA form without parent information, you will not receive an SAI. That is a student aid index. Now, some state-based and school-based aid programs look at the SAI to determine your eligibility for their funds. Since you won't have an SAI, you will not be considered for those financial aid programs, and you could be giving up the chance to have access to many sources of financial aid. So if possible, please do encourage your parents to provide their information. Just because they provide the information doesn't mean that they are, signing on the dotted line that they're going to support you. It's just that without their information, you may be excluded from many sources of financial aid, and we want you to be included. So please do have that conversation with your parent, and hopefully you can come to an agreement. And even without their financial support, you can be considered for as much additional aid possible. All right, let's move on to the next question. That is, do I have to decide by May 1st? That's actually tomorrow. I just received these financial aid letters, and my mom and I are unsure what they say. How do I compare these? I'm crashing out if I have to make a decision this week. Well, I visited my high school a couple of weeks ago to work with some seniors there who are reviewing their financial aid offer letters. And trust me, I feel your pain. The schools can communicate the offers in a variety of ways. And so, if you've applied to 3 or 4 schools and you're trying to sort through this information, there might not be any uniformity there. Every letter is written in a different way. The numbers are listed in different places. The names associated with those financial aid offers, like loan versus grant, scholarship, all of that, there's so much variety there that it makes comparing the financial aid offers a pretty tedious process. So you are not alone in that. Let's take a look at the answer to this question. It's no, you do not have to make your decision by May 1st. May 1st is likely your school's preferred deposit deadline. What you can do is communicate with the schools that you are considering and ask about an extension to deposit. You also want to make sure that you ask them about what things may be delayed when you delay your decision-making process. Because many schools begin communicating with students who have paid the deposit about orientation days, campus events, and housing decisions. So make sure you contact the school, find out what you could miss by not declaring or making that decision by May 1st, and then go from there. But the most important thing is for you to make an informed decision. And sometimes that takes a little bit of extra time, especially if you receive the financial aid office offer letters a little bit late. All right, let's move on to our next question, which appears to be our last question. That question is, can I deposit at more than one school? All right, let's take a look at the answer. And we have a follow-up question to ask. Did you deposit at any school during the early decision time frame? If you committed during early decision, you actually made a binding commitment to attend that institution. But to answer the question outside of early decision, yes, you can make multiple deposits. There's nothing to stop you from depositing at multiple schools. Now, we don't recommend that because a deposit may not be refundable. So after you decide which school that you want to attend, you may forfeit the deposits that you've made to other institutions. And we want you to have as much money as possible to put towards your education at the institution that you actually plan to attend. Okay, so good luck with that. All right. Now, I want to close this episode out with sharing some resources that are available to Marylanders in particular. Maryland is a state that has a student loan ombudsman, and the student loan ombudsman is housed in the state's Department of Labor. The student loan ombudsman is here to help Marylanders with servicer problems that may include failure by your servicer to communicate with you, errors in crediting principal and interest payments, misapplied payments, inaccurate interest rate calculations, billing errors, loan consolidation or modification errors, and or inappropriate collection activity or tactics. So the student loan ombudsman is here for you as Marylanders. And if you have had a problem with your servicer and you've tried to work it out with them and things just aren't moving, you haven't been able to get resolution, you can reach out to the student loan ombudsman to advocate on your behalf. And you can find the student loan ombudsman again online through the state's Department of Labor. The address is scrolling across the bottom of the screen. All right. I have checked social media. I don't see any additional questions. So at this time, I'd like to thank you for joining us here with the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness during the April 30th edition of Office Hours. Office Hours is our free semi-monthly virtual student debt clinic. So if you have questions about student loans or for incoming students, if you have questions about the FAFSA and different sources of funding, please do reach out. You can find us on social media. We are at the MCCFW on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can also go to our website at mccfw.org/contact. We have a contact form that you can fill out to submit your questions. And if you get them in time enough, then we may just answer your question on the next edition of Office Hours, again, presented by the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. There is a lot going on, so we will make sure that we drop some resources in the comments after this video is posted to YouTube and annotated so you can go straight to the content that most concerns you. All right, I'm going to check one more time to see if we have any comments or questions that came in through social media. And I see none, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you again. I'm Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy. Please do reach out at the channels that we've listed, including social media. And thank you for joining us. Until next time, be well.